The second day after Shell. After class, Melondi waved the other girls off with a promise to meet them for lunch. She loved them all, but right now she needed privacy. Zinchiki had slunk off with a dour expression, but that wasn't new. Well, not really. She could scowl at the best of times, but whenever someone mentioned the banquet, Letzi or Desi, it looked like her eyebrows were going to knit together permanently. She couldn't afford to look as bleak as she felt inside, particularly with Professor Pelavon teaching the class alone while her husband stayed in the hospital. While interesting, the class just wasn't the same without him. They'd review material for the year 1933, which left her with mixed feelings. The Earth was locked in an economic depression, and the class had lapsed into animated discussions of monetary policy and how to restore fiscal stability in the wake of the planet's first global war. It wasn't surprising. Economics was a mandatory class for every first-year student, though by this time, any house that hadn't drilled it into a daughter was asking for problems. What had caught her imagination was all the varied ways humans had responded to the crisis, particularly with the moves towards centralized power in Germany, reactions by her sim country of Great Britain, and the fireside talks of the leader of America. The notion of being able to reach all your subjects in one broadcast was quaint. Message traffic in the galaxy was limited to the FTL speeds provided by vast networks of couriers, and was consequently less intimate. Nothing could change the laws of physics, but it made her realize how great a princess's responsibilities were, to be seen and connect with the people. Which was how she found herself knocking on Professor Pelavon's door and sitting down in her office. "Now then, how can I help?" Mever Pelavon sat behind her desk expectantly. It was a perfectly straightforward question, but simple questions rarely had simple answers. "I hope it's not about yesterday's class. I have a rough grasp of the human content, but I expect Tom will want to do a review tomorrow." Was not a word that she'd ever been allowed to use, but it seemed like a useful option. A placeholder to let her know she was working on something. But she didn't have the whole picture of her thoughts, and that was sort of the point. Melondi knew that her options were limited both by circumstance and choice. She couldn't talk to the girls about this. While she trusted them all, she had an image to maintain. Any calls to Lady Wakama at the palace were out until Agent Davari gave the all clear. Her only update from Indara was that they were still heading out of the system, and with the communications lag, there was no way to really talk to her. That left Lady Pelavon. "It's not, ma'am. I know this time is set aside for class questions, but I don't know who to turn to." Melondi dove in with a confident tone in her voice that was matched by nothing. But if you couldn't be confident about something, at least you could be confident in not knowing. "I wanted to ask your advice as an experienced woman." If there were words in Melondi's mind to describe Lady Pelavon, things like sensible, kind, and serene would have topped the list, though proud also slipped in a sort of a good way. She took pride in who she was and what she did. It was the earned sort of pride that made her try harder, do better. Mever Pelavon cared about her life and opened herself to the people in it. There was sometimes a relentless streak to it that slipped out around the edges. On the other hand, she had won a husband. Twice. Asking wasn't such a bad idea. A flicker of surprise passed across Lady Pelavon's face. "Ah, well, for that kind of talk, I'd usually ask if a girl has spoken with their father, but that would be indelicate." Melondi gave a tentative nod, covering over when she gulped. Mever didn't know the half of it. Her father, well, no one spoke of him, and that was for the best. Desi didn't know how good she had it. "I know your family has circumstances." Professor Pelavon canted her head to one side. "This is something to do with Mr. Dasari's son?" "Vadim? No. Well, partly." Melondi found herself looking at her hands and made herself stop. It lacked dignity to come to the professor and then beat around the question. She stilled herself with a quick breath and started over. It's about this partial, ma'am. And yes, because Vadim was there. And no, because he wasn't hurt. But Desi and Letzi were, and I wanted to apologize to your family. I didn't mean to drag anyone into my problems, and Desi getting hurt is... She's my best friend, and I never really had one before. And your husband is... You're very important to us, and while I appreciate the apology, if Desi had to do it all over again, I don't think she would have done anything different. Or Tom. You're very dear to him. And I would venture to guess that Letzi feels the same way. Mavere steepled her fingers a moment before resting her chin on her hands. They're moving Letzi into Desi's room after the surgery, which will give her company for a few days. I understand that Miss Letzi will be getting out as soon as her subdermal therapy is complete. Apparently she intends to keep her scar. She is? I do need to see her and Desi, and Captain Tonnis. Melondi blinked, trying to reconcile the news. I've sort of been kept under a tight leash. I'm very sorry, ma'am. You've said so twice, and I think I made it clear that each of them is right where they want to be, no matter how unfortunate that is at the moment. Professor Pelavon sniffed once, then smiled. It was a good smile. I didn't say that you're forgiven because I thought it was clear. Besides, I already have quite enough on my plate with my husband blaming himself, and Miss Caslin doing the same over her young man. Caslin, you mean... Melondi thought about the banquet and all that happened. Aku? That's the one. She came around to my office sounding rather like you, and we had a very nice conversation. Her expression must have been showing, as the professor looked bemused. I'm not a counsellor, and I don't think it's betraying a confidence that she's feeling somewhat better about matters. You've just taken my stock of people bearing the galaxy on their shoulders from 2 to 3, and 1 is quite sufficient. I know they haven't been dressing the same since the banquet, but nobody knew why. I guess that she... well... Miss Caslin had hopes. To be honest, I expect they both did, but they're sensible young women. I think they're going to mope about for a bit, but according to Professor Zarin, they had quite a fine time with the painters. Mavere gave a reassuring smile that reminded her of Lady Wakama. They're a resilient pair, and I expect they'll bounce back soon enough. So if Lynn and Mara are fine, is just your husband? That is, Professor Warwick? The pit in Melondi's stomach grew appreciably. If there's anything I can do, I'd never forgive myself if... Thomas is very fond of you, so you can do me 2 favors. The first is to stop blaming yourself out of all proportion, and help him do the same. When women in your position make decisions, it's very well and good to consider the consequences as well as the results, but there's no sense in beating upon yourself unduly. Tom is marked by his past. I suppose the stabbing pain that adults feel is life telling us it's working. Mavere's shrug was elegantly minimal. My co-waif and I already have enough distractions lined up to get him out of his funk, and Captain Tonnis seems to be doing her part. The first thing you can do is visit with them. Captain Tonnis? And Professor Warwick? Melondi's mind whirled. Did Desi know? Solani Tonnis was a big woman. The woman could keep company with the Golden Glaives and not stand out. You mean that you're... Yes, I do. Mavere's smile was coy, and she looked entirely satisfied. Solani is a very fine woman, and I expect that seeing her has helped him, in a roundabout fashion. If nothing else, I expect she might finally wear down his stamina once she's better. Melondi felt the blush creeping over her cheeks. There was no amount of training in the world that could stop it. But if the Pelavon family was satisfied... It's certainly preferable to teasing him over his warden's uniform. The professor changed the subject, much to her relief. I've never met a man so adverse to tassels. So he got the uniform? Melondi sat up straighter.
With the bell? He isn't scheduled to serve at the ceremony for several months. That reminds me, I need to look up Morris dancing, whatever that is.
Mavere held up a peremptory finger.
As for the second matter, I wasn't referring to Miss Kamara, but rather Miss Senshiki. She reappeared on campus in the very early hours of the morning, and I had to resolve a rather large AutoCAD bill from the company. Honestly, I was quite surprised she still made it to class. If it's a matter of expenses for the banquet, I'm sure that...
The was on her lips. She was probably under surveillance this very second, and looking her best with the woman in the bunker counted for as much as her friends.
I'm certain that my sources will help. Thank you, but that won't be necessary, miss. Besides, a lady never inquires into another woman's upholstery bills.
A soft blush crept over the professor's cheeks.
If you want to feel better, see the people who care for you and show them you care. Yes, ma'am, I will, and thank you.
Melondi bit her lower lip. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. And Vadim? She wanted to do the right thing, not sweep down on him like a princess. She wanted to do this right.
If you don't mind my asking one more question, how did you propose?
Her clearance to leave the academy grounds had come around midday, but it was well into the afternoon when Melondi finally made it out to the hospital. Melondi stuck to her guns and made the trip despite Agent Devara's concerns. Her cover was travelling with Professor Pelavon, who slipped off to see her husband and Captain Tonis. True to the professor's words, Letzi had been moved into Deshin's room. Desi's operation was scheduled for the morning, and the surgery seemed daunting, though the Gearchild doctor was confident of success. Melondi found herself looking at Deshin as the three of them caught up. It was difficult seeing Desi unable to move, her words coming with difficulty, but somehow she'd already bounced back. Even with the sound of the respirator helping her to breathe, it seemed like she could weather anything. As for Letzi...
Look, I'm keeping the scar, she said adamantly.
Laying propped up in bed, she seemed to be fairly comfortable, though she winced when she moved.
It's not like my co-mothers will ever see it anyway, and if they do, they can go to the deeps. I feel like I should be pinning a medal on both of you, and I can't do anything.
It was difficult not to grumble. It seemed unfair that Desi was herself, while Letzi was positively grinning.
I feel helpless because I can't do anything for you, but all of this is classified. Hey, you already have. First thing after the holiday, I'm joining the NOTC. My family may pitch a fit, but serving the Imperium is what I've always wanted to do. I got shot over dinner. Next time, I'm going to be behind Navy battleplate. Letzi grinned. Besides, some guys are into scars. I'll make up a great story, though it would never be as good as the real thing.
It took all of Melondi's training not to look askance at Desi. She could see her expression. Changing the subject seemed prudent. Fortunately, Letzi did it for them.
So, we can talk here, right? They got your sister's agent, so everything's good with things? Stuff? We can get back to school after the holidays, and once the professor starts training, we can beat each other with sticks?
Desi snorted and rolled her eyes.
You sound like Senshiki. I can't believe I'm saying this, but is she okay? I'm actually starting to miss her threatening me. The agent situation seems to have resolved itself. I think when my mother gets back, I need to talk to her.
Melondi choked back any uncertainties. What was the point of maintaining an image if she was only the family spare? People had fought and suffered for her, and Komorji wasn't fit to sit on the throne. No, she wasn't that girl anymore and would never be again.
I'm putting myself forward to be her heir.
Thoughtful silence descended on the room, but she'd said the words, and they mattered here more than anywhere.
As for Senshiki, she's fine. Kind of nervous in a weird sort of way, but fine.
Melondi shrugged at Desi's expression. It was hard to see her so helpless, but she forced things to be normal. They would be. She'd make sure of that.
She wouldn't talk much about how she got back to school, and she practically clawed out the window when I asked about past. I can't explain it. You think it has something to do with him? I can't believe all the stuff Desi was holding out on me. You really went to the tide pool? I don't care how alien she is. Can you imagine meeting a guy there? And Liam was dancing up on stage.
Letzi cocked her head to one side and exhaled with feeling.
Goddess's tits. I need to get a boyfriend. You're right. It's probably something to do with him. Can you imagine a guy being orphaned at a place like that?
Melondi shook her head ruefully.
Someone should check on him. Maybe see what happened with his family. She said her Warbangar's Duchess Eliana, right? Desi said. Don't you want us to tell you the devious plan we've come up with?
Deshin was putting up a good front, but her doctors were saying her body would need time to learn the neural rap. Melondi grinned, playing along.
Sure. What have you come up with? Check into his family.
Desi couldn't nod, but she still managed to look smug. Melondi managed not to roll her eyes.
Great idea. I'm glad you thought of it. You're welcome. So you can get right on that then? Well, I can't move, but Letzi can, and we've got nothing but time. Besides, the codes you lent me for that other project work perfectly well, and this ward is set up with secure lines.
Desi looked as happy as seemed possible, considering her condition.
So we already did.
Melondi blinked.
Did what? Checked on his family.
Deshin hadn't recovered from being fully paralyzed, and had already hacked into the Imperial Library? If she weren't her advisor, there would probably be a prison sentence in there somewhere. It seemed so human. Melondi raised an eyebrow.
I suppose that you expect a compliment?
Desi sniffed.
What kind of advisor would I be if I worked for compliments? I'll take one instead of a medal.
Letzi grinned irreverently, holding up her omnipad.
And a bonus. Good job. What about the bonus?
Letzi feigned a pout, but her grin showed through.
Very good job,
Melondi said solemnly.
She's going to be a wonderful empress.
Class. The third day after Shell. Tom had finished reviewing the events of 1933. It was a dark and mournful year, full of portents that the girls wouldn't understand. Roosevelt began reopening the banks as part of his New Deal. Hitler had come to power as Chancellor of Germany and began sweeping away the Weimar Republic. The British flew over Mount Everest, and the first drive-in movie opened. Book burnings came into vogue, and Dachau opened its gates. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. The girls would have their exams before the FROV holiday, and when they came back there would be the World War II sim, this time without any of the novel endings he'd allowed in their first game. All the poisons that lurked would hatch out, and humanity would be seen for what it was, the noble and the vile alike. A coming of age, and a warning. He'd had a message back yesterday from Tom Steinberg to follow up on, but all of it was weeks from now. The next simulation will be after break. Teams will be selected, though given the IOTC's request to join, this will be a much larger game. I'm going to allow you to petition for teams if you want to keep your prior nations, but you have the option to move around. Other than that... Tom forced himself not to sigh. Desi and Letzi had called in and were watching the class through Letzi's omnipad. He'd have just enough time to get to the hospital after class, along with Miv. Leia would be there later with her mother's later that evening. Other than that, still felt hollow and empty, after all they'd all been through. Your papers will be due the day before vacation. Other than that, Professor Pelavon and I want to focus on your other exams. And have a good holiday. He looked up at the girls and gave them a smile, hoping he didn't look as tired as he felt. Any final questions?
Professor? Sir?
Tom gave Melondi a smile and a nod. After all that had happened, a princess of the galaxy was calling him Sir, and showing him respect. Maybe that was all that humanity needed. Maybe after all the social programs and jobs and healthcare, it still came down to respect. Maybe that was enough. It felt like it was. Yes, Melondi?
Sir, I've decided that, well, with things going on at home, I'm going to stay on campus for the holiday.
The girls took that in with a flutter, and Tom tried to pass together all he knew about the Ifrovi holiday. The Solstice Festival was more like a Thanksgiving or an Easter than a Christmas, with its focus on the start of winter and looking forward to spring. It was a time for families to be together and... Oh.
I want to continue my studies while I'm here, and if you don't mind, I'd like to help out with Desi.
It warmed his heart that Melondi wanted to spend time with Desi, and the extra help wouldn't go amiss. There was something Burdine had been messaging him about, and he needed to call. But this? It wasn't a bad deal. I know Desi will be happy to have you around, and my wives and I appreciate it. Tom kicked the matter around. I can't offer you any insights into the World War II sim, though if you want some in-depth reading material, I can probably find something.
Sir, I appreciate it, but...
A look chased across Melondi's face, but she banished it and raised her chin.
That isn't the lesson I need. Sir, with respect, I need to know more than how to win a war.
As part of this simulation, you'll be...
Sir, that's not it. I am asking this badly, so please forgive me.
Melondi breaking in on his train of thought surprised him. Princess or no, it was something the girls never did, and he nodded as she worked it through.
I've had literally everyone fighting for my future. I don't know what my mother is going to decide, but I have to fight for my future, and I need to know how to win. Can you teach me how to think and fight like a human?
Melondi. He felt himself groping for a lifeline and looked at Miv, who canted her head and arched an eyebrow. Big help. Desi would have said something if she were here, but while she could hear over the omnipad, that was no help. This was different. The banquet had gone utterly wrong. Mel, I wasn't a frontline soldier, I was...
Sir, you said you were a logistician.
Melondi was sitting taller in her chair now, and he could feel the eyes of the girls on him. Miv's, Desi's, the women in the bunker. For all he knew, the video would end up televised on the History Channel. Hell, what had he done on S.H.I.E.L.D. that hadn't?
Professor, didn't you tell us that warriors win battles by studying tactics, but to win a war, you study logistics?
Well, yes.
And dirty tricks,
Zinchiki muttered into the silence, as the room waited on him.
Sir, you've taught us critical thinking. You can teach me this. I always thought I'd have my cousin and her husband to rely on, but they're gone now. I need to be able to think outside normal boundaries until my mother returns. I need your help.
Melondi did not plead. Her words were polite, but brooked no discussion. Though after a moment she looked to Miver, then back to him.
Please?
They've got me. I don't know what I can do, but I can't say no.
Honored Hakakt.
Zinshiki's tail flickered with intent.
Please do not tell me that you are not good at dirty tricks.
What happened if someone stopped being a good Hakakt? A vivid image of Zinshiki's mother and a half-dozen other Pezrin popped to mind. They were in human food, wearing barbecue bibs. Carrot and stick. Well played.
You can do this, Father.
Desi's voice carried over the omnipad.
Teach us how to fight like humans. Not just the katana, though I'm looking forward to that. You can do this.
Carrot, stick, and sledgehammer. Tom looked over at Miv again. She smiled serenely and gave him a shrug that practically came with captions.
You're going to do it. We both know it already. Just do your best.
Fine. The rest of the girls were already looking excited, and there was no way this wasn't going to turn into a long conversation with Lamana Davari. But he'd given in. There was no way he could refuse, but Desi had sealed the deal. But what to say now? This wasn't on a lesson plan. Tom rubbed his forehead and looked at his omnipad and reached in, poking through his files. The damn thing could store anything, so it was... Fine. You will want to learn how to fight like a human, then watch this tomorrow, and be ready to discuss it during our next class.
Sir, I can't quite make out the file name.
Belder looked at the file. She'd signed up for his English class after her last date with Liam.
What is it?
It's a video file of a warrior of sorts, named Bugs Bunny. Tom felt progressively more stupid, and he paused. It had been a spur-of-the-moment response, but on second thought it wasn't so bad. His third thoughts picked over the first two and nodded. If you want to learn to think like a human, then you have to start with the values we instill from our youth. I'm flailing, but at least it sounds good.
So this Bugs is a great warrior?
Desala asked. Bugs, and sort of. Tom shrugged. It was true after a fashion. He can suffer fools, but only to a point. After that, he uses his wits to take down his opponents.
Was he ever defeated?
Zinchiki looked at him intently, her tail going still. Well, only once, by a spear and magic helmet.
A spear and magic helmet?
His mentee's tail flicked once. He nodded firmly. Why not? He was already committed. Yes, a spear and magic helmet. He could already hear Desala muttering, but Zinchiki nodded once, looking satisfied.
So a legend, then. Commendable. Figures of myth have power.
That makes sense. More of a metaphor than myth, but yes. Tom felt like he was getting on firmer footing and patted his subconscious on the head. This could work, at least for a start. He exemplifies a philosophy that's a sort of mental jujitsu. Jacksmi raised her hand and he gave her a nod.
Sir, what is jujitsu?
It's a martial art, hand-to-hand combat. Tom picked over a practical answer. It uses an opponent's strengths against them to bring victory.
So, an advanced class? This sounds a lot like the banquet.
Melondi nodded in satisfaction.
Thank you, sir. I'm sure it will be just what I need.
Melondi? Girls? Tom felt a hole opening in the pit of his stomach. The banquet. The banquet was a disaster. Desi got hurt. Letzi got hurt. People were killed. And you didn't get the data you needed. I don't know if I can offer what you need.
Sir, with respect?
Tom shrugged. It wasn't like Melondi had ever not been rude. After the debacle this past shell, she had every right if she wanted to be. Of course.
Sir, your plan went perfectly. We got everything we set out to get that it was possible to get. Someone I trust reminded me that it's good to consider the consequences and the results, but there is no sense in berating yourself.
Melondi said firmly, while the other girls nodded.
We trust you. You'll do your best.
Tom watched the class file out and gathered his things. He looked up as Miver slipped an arm about his waist and hugged him close. Miv, what am I going to do?
Beloved husband, you will do the best you can.
Miver pulled him close before pinching his ass.
You can be my very own James Blonde. No, I don't think it's radioactive.
Caslin bent in for a closer look at the glowing sample in Lark's hand.
Why'd you ask?
In the privacy of the conference room, the study group wound down for the evening. The conversation began to drift from next week's exams and papers to the banquet. Despite the evening starting to break up, she loitered around, still hoping for a late evening snack. The chocolate was being saved for a get-well party for Desi at the hospital, and without a refill from human food, it was getting scarce. Knowing that it was getting scarce, everyone forgot to bring any out. Conversation began turning to everyone's plans for Irovi. Except for Melondi and Kellogg, everyone seemed bent on going home. That didn't mean the main topic wasn't still...
I sent a message to my family that I'll be on Willist with you.
Over on the couch, Pris and Belder were still setting up their vacation. With Liam.
Not that I could come home, but they'd be expecting me to be here on chill. Belle, are you sure this will be alright with your father? And, well, everything else? It will be fine. You're my friend, and the family will love to meet you. It's not like you're after my boyfriend. Though, it really would be nice if you can talk about Professor Warwick a little. I mean, the more nice things they hear about humans, it would help.
Belder struggled through offering up a tentative grin.
Nobody back home knows much about humans, and there are some funny ideas. I know my father can be kind of crazy, but I promise you'll have fun. Well, maybe an edited version of Professor Warwick, and anyone can be both right and crazy under the law.
Pris corrected primly. Desala watched one of the twins write that down on her omnipad, where it would probably be resurrected at some inconvenient moment in the future. Goddess help the painters. And all the goddesses help anyone who tries anything against the painters.
I'm guessing they haven't seen Liam's dancing videos?
Everyone laughed as Belder turned 3 shades of blue. Since everyone was holding out on having any snacks, Desala decided to punish them all by digging out her spatial geopolicy notes. Learning more about the Imperium's internal makeup was considered an easy elective, and every first-year girl took the class. It was useful, if boring, and she was rewarded by Jacksme rolling her eyes.
Can't we wait? Kellogg groused, rolling over onto her back. I still want to hear more about what Belder and Pris are planning with Liam.
Desala cantered ahead, gratified she wasn't the only one who thought the pair looked shifty.
Nothing else. My father, he'll be fine. They'll love Liam.
Belder was turning bluer by the moment.
It would be great, honestly.
Giving up on geopolicy, Desala joined in with the others, picking over what had happened to Kadira Zariva, and how you could get rid of an inconvenient interior agent. Everyone knew it was being recorded, and Lamana Davari might see it, but still... Melondi offered up an eye-opening early anecdote about her great-great-great-grandmother who had a falling out with one of her agents, and ended the matter with a poisoned shellfish. No one had blamed the cooks, as it was a beach party. Waiters could be blamed for many disasters, but the men had been found blameless, and no one had wished injustice upon them. Desala remembered the story as one of the opening acts of Empress Corandi's reign. History kindly referred to her as eccentric, and while beloved, the woman was generally acknowledged to have been a fountain of scandals for years before her conspicuously quiet death. There were rumours, but no one believed that sort of thing. Humans hadn't even been discovered yet. As things started to wind down again, and the merry theories ended, Desala packed up her omnipad and was getting up to call it a night for a second time. Immediately, the room erupted as the twins clamoured for snacks that still failed to appear. The rift that had been eating at the pair before the break seemed to have mended, however, and they bounced in this evening, full of life, before plonking down on their usual couch and asking what Belder's plans were. That proved too much, and the whole conversation opened up again, gamely deflected by Pris and Belder in turns, though Pris was starting to blush furiously. Heads together, the twins were watching everything as Belder's story started to unravel.
This sounds so exciting. Come on, taking a man home to your family? Without an escort? You have to propose. So, will there be a big wedding on the ranch, or will it be here on Shill with his matriarch? Or maybe one wedding each?
No! Belder growled, now more or less permanently blue with embarrassment. When they weren't busy pretending to be each other, the twins loved to tease, and it was almost a relief when the conversation turned back to simpler issues, like murder and Princess Caudry's agent. Desala squared up to the pair since they were sitting across from her couch, acutely aware of the others. Desi usually picked things apart as Melondi's advisor, but as the resident cynic, the pair needed careful handling before Belder expired from embarrassment, or someone was jailed for treason. The conversation could go either way. It wouldn't do to treat them cruelly, or even pretend to, but both of them were staring at Belder with dark, innocent eyes, while their questions turned the farm girl inside out. Speaking of stories, we never heard about what you did with the painters while they were here. Desala watched the pair quail, though they rallied fast.
We were perfect ladies,
one snapped back with practiced ease.
And it's not our fault if anyone got jealous,
added the other. Of course you were. I can't imagine you were ever up to anything scandalous, Desala said soothingly.
That's right. We have an internship to think about,
the first said firmly, while the second nodded emphatically.
Besides, we just wanted to hear what you were all talking about. It's not like we started talking about murder. We'd never do something like that.
Desala glanced around as no one said a word. Everyone in the room knew that if the twins ever decided to commit a murder, the planning would be flawless. The interior would be left in the dark, and the body would turn to dust before anyone ever suspected. It was only a week and a half until Efrovi, 3 weeks at home and no homework at all. What was the worst that could happen? Rikishi felt her psyche stiffen in frustration. Of course, a ritual cleansing was needed. You couldn't just give someone dinnerware, but only Zenshiki would complain about coming when she planned to anyway. Rikishi liked her sister. If you gave her a problem, the answer was never, I don't know, it was, I'll find out. She'd be a strong bandmother someday, if her direct nature didn't get her killed.
There are problems that just can't be solved by sticking something pointy into someone or shooting them. I try and stay away from those kinds of problems, because they can get complicated,
Rikishi chattered, as they made their way to Sunchaser's quarters, and tried not to envy her sister. The dinner set was one thing, but 2 kills? Another 3 and Zenshiki would earn her first earring. Part of her understood Putveri's jealousy, but kills shouldn't concern a pathfinder, and she set it aside. They reached Sunchaser's door, but rather than chiming for entry, Rikishi tried to get through to Zenshiki one more time.
Negotiating a work contract was complicated enough, but personal conflicts are a whole other matter, you know.
Her sister rewarded her with a blank look, and Rikishi felt her psyche thrash as she chimed to enter, and the hatch slid open. Dark mother, she loved her sister, but still.
You know, Zenshiki, I'm a simple woman,
Sunchaser called out as they entered. Rikishi saw her mentor staring at her omnipad.
Right?
Zenshiki gave no answer, so Sunchaser repeated the question as she ducked under her counter. Crossing the room, Rikishi heard Sunchaser doing Sunchaser things with the endless bits she collected, before slinking over to drop into the chair.
Aren't you going to ask what happened?
Rikishi resisted taking her sister by the scruff of the neck and pushing her into a chair, but Zenshiki sat down after she did, so the effect was much the same. After a double blink, they were rewarded.
What happened? I never need a reminder that you are Maraket's daughter.
Sunchaser rolled her eyes.
You'll be Rikishi's problem, though, not mine. No, for today I just have to deal with the problem you kits have while the warband sorts it out. Rikishi, tell her.
An order was an order, and Rikishi braced herself.
Well, it's like this. When the band deployed to the Northern Palace to track you down, Kalis got to talking with Sarah, and the next thing you know, she and Alesh were talking to Harashraf, and you know how she gets, so... The brief version, Sunchaser muttered. Right. Well, brief?
Rikishi saw Sunchaser's nod and sighed. Brief took out all the good bits, but fine.
Harasov might have mentioned to Pitfiri that you're being considered for the next slot as bandmother. Pitfiri did something stupid and took a shot, which set things off. Now the bandmothers are worried about expressing concern, Sunchaser amended. Bandmothers are never worried. They're expressing concern that the whole accident with Princess Kalira is going to be blamed on the fight, and if the fight gets traced to the shot, and the shot gets traced to us, they're concerned.
Rikishi spread her hands. The matter was as clear as could be.
You can tell the bandmothers that Kalira is fine.
Zinchiki blinked twice, and made the second one last. Rikishi knew what that meant. You will tell me why you were following me in excruciating detail later. Instead, she turned to Sunchaser and nodded respectfully.
So, Harasov will have to stand Pitfiri up in front of the bandmothers by the scruff of her neck, and they tear a strip of fur off, and everything will be fine now. Well, not exactly, Rikishi explained. Pitfiri has disappeared. Disappeared.
Her band sister took that in for a moment.
In that case, where do I send flowers? What? It's a human thing.
Zinchiki shook her head.
Never mind. I am here because you are calling the whole warband to track her? Well, that could be tricky.
Sunchaser set her hands across her stomach and gave them both a significant look.
Rikishi and I are simple women.
Rikishi knew the look she was getting was not the one her sister was getting. A warband could not let its members be lost, and Zinchiki knew that. But more importantly, a warband could not let its members fight. And Sunchaser had seen the path Pitfiri was going down. If their eldest sister was set against Zinchiki, that would be bad. That was where a pathfinder came in, and Sunchaser was watching Zinchiki intently. This was not just a problem, it was also a test.
Can she be tracked?
Zinchiki said after a long moment. Sunchaser nodded back and Rikishi took over again.
We've sent out the whole warband even farther, Rikishi nodded. She is her mother's daughter as well, and Pitfiri may be an even better scout than Harasov. They haven't found a trace of her. In that case, I suggest a clever strategy. Write her off and sell her things to the highest bidder.
Zinchiki gave them both something that might be a smile.
It's not tricky, and you are simple women.
Rikishi found herself fighting off a scowl, and a desire to go for the scruff of her sister's neck, but training was training. Sunchaser was testing her too. Thankfully, Zinchiki's stubbornness took a back seat to her obligation to the family.
Very well. She's still our band sister. We'll find her. I can call in a favor.
She drew a deep sigh and fidgeted with her Asaic.
Pathfinder, while I do that, I make a formal claim of 2 kills, and would ask if you can perform a ritual cleansing on these. I wish to make a gift of them.
Rikishi favored her favorite sister with a smile. She didn't see Sunchaser's look when she examined the dinner set, or how quickly she made it disappear.